Well, welcome to AI Rounds, where we explore the intersection of AI and healthcare. I'm Dr. Anil Jain, Chief Innovation Officer at Innovaccer, and I'm joined by Jennifer Blumenthal, Director of Product at Milliman IntelliScript, Brendan Keeler, Interoperability Lead at HDD Health, and Alya Sulaiman, she's Chief Compliance and Privacy Officer at Datavant. Together, we'll be unpacking the latest developments in health AI and their implications for providers, patients, and the industry at large. Well, let's start with perhaps the most significant news. I think yesterday was a very special day. We have a new administration in the White House with many new faces across DOJ, HHS, FDA, CDC, and CMS. Now, let me start by asking you all, what do we expect this administration to do about healthcare AI or healthcare more broadly? We know that many of the executive sort of orders that the President Biden had passed during his administration were rescinded yesterday. So what are we expecting? And maybe who wants to go first? All right, Brendan.
I'll jump on it. Well, we literally, like Trump just announced 500 billion of private investment and had Larry Ellison from Oracle up on stage. And the first thing he talked about was healthcare. So if you want to be excited about this special day yesterday, special is one adjective, then I think it is at least investment, excitement, and activity pouring into AI instead of trepidation and fear. And I think it's something that's going to be really pivotal and change industries everywhere. I think leaning into it so we can figure out where regulation is needed, where different agencies need to put the brakes on. First, we need to lean into it and own it and be leading in the world in it. So I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I think one thing for sure that came across loud and clear is that we need to be competing at the world stage. And it sounds like $500 billion with some national leaders at the forefront. Sounds very exciting. Jennifer, Alya, what do you both think?
Alya, I'll let you go first.
Well, so one thing, we're going to see a lot of action from this administration that I'd put in the deregulatory camp, and seeing some of the executive orders rescinded, seeing, your run-of-the-mill regulatory freezes. I know a lot of folks in my legal circles, that's what we're focused on. The thing that I'm reminding folks, though, is that there has been plenty of binding, as of today, policy made on the AI front that specifically impacts healthcare AI across the federal and the state level. So while I'm really excited about the investment and enthusiasm and, maybe just some renewed flexibility to innovate that certain companies may feel, I still think that we're going to, we've got plenty of rubrics to look to make sure that we're doing this the right way, responsibly, in ways that don't get people hurt, in ways that create some transparency for, and probably talk about this a little bit later, healthcare organizations that are being sold like 20 different versions of the same AI Scribe every month. I think we still have some nice rubrics out there, whether it's recent FDA guidance, ASTP ONC's decision support intervention framework. Like, there are things that we have generally coalesced around, like that we should probably know about AI before we deeply integrate it into the healthcare system. I think those things are going to continue to persist, and we'll learn more, right, about what questions are really useful to ask and which are, the great talking points for an AI governance white paper, but not super impactful when it comes to how does this actually solve the problem I'm trying to solve. So that, I think, is a theme we're going to see continue, although it could look a little different just given the political winds that we're all, in the midst of dealing with today.
So I think I heard some interesting things. I heard that although there's some privatization going on and some deregulation going on, that the existing rubrics that may have been laid out foundationally are going to persist, and that might give us a bit of a North Star. I also heard that the snake oil salesmen are alive and well when it comes to AI right now. That's what I heard. Jennifer, what do you think?
I agree with Alya. I think data privacy, algorithm bias, and just overall consumer and patient safety is still going to be pretty forefront in decision making from both customers, people wanting to buy solutions, to also future rulemaking. Healthcare moves slowly, so I think that is going to be an interesting mix for AI.
Healthcare moves slowly. What do you mean by that? Even compared to other industries? Yeah. And why might that be? Is it because of the regulatory side of things, or is it that the alignment between those who benefit and those who have to pay for services? Why is healthcare moving slowly when it comes to this sort of?
I think healthcare is more complicated than most people think when they jump in. I think it comes down to who the buyer is, who's paying for it. I think that something that I know from personal experience is uh, whatever the hype is always slower to adoption than people really think it is. And then I think lastly, healthcare is complicated because it straddles so many different types of people, different state lines, the regulations from the federal level down to the state level, down to implementation. It's just complicated. And then where care is delivered and how it's paid for. It's just overall, I don't think unless you're in it, you really understand all the nooks and crannies that exist.
That makes a lot of sense. And I suspect that, as we have our continued conversations, that as the final appointments for the secretary level and the undersecretary level positions are solidified, we're probably going to get a little bit more detail as to what we think is likely to happen. Now, Brendan, you said something very interesting. You talked about the $500 billion of investment that's going to go into AI. And we know that even prior to the new administration sort of telegraphing how they're going to be pursuing things, there was a lot of funding and activity on the M&A side of things, if you will, that really have been focused on all these sort of AI companies and I know that's not who Alya was referring to, but these AI companies that are in the headlines, getting some funding out there, solving some big challenges. And as a physician, I will tell you that like nothing better than for some AI solutions that are actually going to take some of the low value work away from docs and start to drive better outcomes. Well, when you look at these different names and these players are, do you expect this type of M&A activity to continue as we go into 2025, coming off the heels of JP Morgan, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take this one, but we should kind of do snake draft, right? Like I went first this time, the first question. We should go back the other direction,
We
but
absolutely can do that. You mentioned the 500 billion. I just want to know whether you're going to be spending some of that money on M&A.
I think, as Innovaccer can attest from their acquisition this morning, mergers and acquisition is hot. I think that comes from the downswing of companies that raised during the last bubble, the COVID bubble, and the influx of AI money and just new capital. Maybe you can blame this administration or for that new capital, but for a variety of reasons, investment is going back up again. And so companies that are able to raise successfully, newer companies, companies that have $500 million because their health, what's the health, the consortium, the Commure consortium, the Health Catalyst consortium, like those groups have a lot of money, they've raised a lot of money, and they continue to buy assets to with these tailwinds to either sort of cover their tracks as their core business struggles, or to architect that grand vision that they've always had, I think, in more positive terms. So yeah, I think we're going to see that play out and then get to this new period where AI companies are and other new companies out of this bubble are on the bubble, and then we'll go back through the cycle.
Jennifer, thoughts?
I think the AI companies that directly interact with patients are super interesting. What I've heard through the grapevine is that they have really high engagement. People are, especially with specific demographic groups, people maybe 65 plus, there's a loneliness epidemic in the United States. And I've heard that some of these companies, some of the ones that have been in the news recently from a funding perspective, I know that they're getting a really high conversion rate and retention and engagement with the people they're interacting with. And I think this sounds so bad as I say this, but I think it's so interesting if you look at how AI is being used in other markets, maybe in like the digital girlfriend markets or boyfriends, and how people are lonely and they're interacting. Like I could see somebody talking for a long time to some sort of solution. I think that and the more data that you're collecting out of that, you're going to be learning more as they're kind of just having a conversation. And I think that data is very important. And I think it will increase the value of those organizations. Data is what powers these algorithms over time. So that's kind of my take on it.
And perhaps if you were to expand that into a broader behavioral health category as well.
Yeah, or
A
social
lot of,
determinants of health is something I was
yeah,
thinking about.
a lot of engagement.
And
Um,
even just like how they're, yeah, I think that um, patient engagement generally has been a very hard space, but there's something more natural about kind of the conversational aspect to it. And as these, I think as they feel more and more human-like, um, I think that's interesting.
Very interesting. Now, you brought up, Jennifer, the concept of all this data that's being amassed by these companies that are having these interactions with folks. Alya, from your point of view and your experience, what do we need to watch out for with these companies that are aggregating all this data between the behaviors and the interactions they have um, with their users? They're not really patients per se, they're users, and I suspect that HIPAA wouldn't really cover them. What's your thoughts on that? All these companies on the M&A scene that are sort of being valued for all the data that they're collecting. What do we need to watch out for? What do we need to be thinking?
Yeah, well, I think the one thing I've noticed about sort of AI strategies, AI governance, how is AI going to, help me reach the, a tech multiplier and valuation, is that you really can't answer any of those questions unless you have awesome data governance and really high quality data to feed into and use with these tools. And when, in my experience as a private practice attorney at a law firm, very few organizations have asked basic questions about what did we actually collect this data for in the first place? Is it even appropriate for the use case that we're considering? Is it going to solve the problem that we're trying to solve with this AI solution? Do we have any idea on how to measure if this works and how will we know if this is successful? One thing that's been fascinating to see on some of the like the AI Scribe pieces, just coming back to that theme, is there are a lot of organizations I work with that wanted to scrutinize AI scribes based on note accuracy and succinctness and a bunch of other quality metrics, and very few, if any, of those organizations had ever actually benchmarked their kind of pre-AI scribe clinician notes against any of those criteria, which made measurement of like, is this making a difference, a little challenging. So what I would say about the kind of the privacy angle, the data governance angle, is that it's table stakes right now. And even if you're not HIPAA regulated, you have a dozen state privacy laws that treat health information as sensitive and subject to additional protections, limitations on disclosure, transparency notices, you name it. So you've got to pay attention to this and factor it into your strategy at some point. And it's a really, like, for me, it's like a really easy way to tell a company that's just put a pretty wrapper around like an OpenAI like API versus a company that has like a real product, to just like take a look at like their T's and C's and privacy policy. Like, do they know what kind of data that they're collecting through their product? Have they checked the box on what are some like pretty basic concepts around how they use disclosed data in a way that makes sense in their documents online? And if not, it's kind of an immediate red flag to me to ask deeper questions about the nature of their product. Do they really know what they're doing, and do they have a clear vision on how it's intended to be used? Because these things, kind of large language and multimodal models aside, like the solutions in healthcare need to be tailored to solving a specific problem. And I'm always highly skeptical of anyone who's like, the real play is data aggregation, and then we'll be able to solve any and all problems. I've just yet to see a business case where that actually worked.
So what I'm hearing is that as folks are doing their due diligence in the M&A scene, that there's probably a checklist around data governance and AI governance that is table stakes for these companies, and buyer beware if they're not going through and dotting their I's and crossing their T's. I would hope that there is a ChatGPT model that can give you a checklist of all the things to look out for, but I suspect that there may be some hallucination along the way there. But that's very fascinating. Now you brought up the scribes, and so as we think about the sort of the AI ambient scribe vendors out there, you know, you can't go anywhere without any medical conference without seeing some discussion around those. There was a lot of attention at every major conference that I've been to, and every health system that I'm talking to right now, it feels like they're dating these different AI vendors, trying to understand who their scribing partner is going to be. They're doing pilots, short-term pilots. There might even have short-term contracts. They're just trying to figure out whether they have found the right one. So, and we know that there's an article, Aaron Broadwin from Axios wrote an article titled "The Medical Scribe Bubble is About to Burst," where she made the case that the standalone AI scribe vendors are getting commoditized very quickly. It's something that certainly here at Innovaccer we've been speaking about at quite some time. So what's your opinion on how this market will pan out this year? I firmly believe last year was sort of like the dating scene between health systems and scribe vendors. They're just trying to figure things out. But asking the three of you, and maybe Alya, we'll start with you first this time, and then we'll go to Brendan and then Jennifer.
Yeah, I mean, the market is crowded. The functionality and offerings overlap considerably. The quality, I'm not quite so sure. I think there's actually some differentiators in quality that are starting to emerge. And the more that people share their experiences from these pilots, you know, maybe outside of just like the CIO circles and in broader communities, you know, I think we'll get a better sense of that. But I really see the landscape being influenced by three factors. I think number one is integration, deepening integration with the system of record and being sort of natively available for access within an EMR workflow, I think is a huge differentiator. People don't want to click into separate portals and to have separate access credentials or even use SSO and you know copy paste between windows. So I think integration is huge. Two is specialization. I think that there are particular types of specialties that would really benefit from more targeted scribe solutions. I had one pediatrician tell me about, you know, needing a scribe solution that could accurately transcribe a visit while there's a screaming toddler in the background. And as a parent of a 2-year-old, I fully endorse whoever is going to build that model. And then I think the third differentiator is going to be advanced features. Like, are we going to get to a decision support, you know, type of offering that's integrated within this functionality? And frankly, who's going to be the AI scribe company that's brave enough to cross the line from being non-device, you know, non-device from an FDA perspective into potentially, again, tipping into a more, you know, highly regulated space? It's not a decision to be taken lightly, but I do see that as the natural evolution here of these functions.
So Alya, just a quick follow-up on that. Are you sort of under the opinion that any kind of decision support within an AI scribing environment would fall under the software as a medical device sort of regulation?
No, in fact, the opposite. I think that there are clear lanes, like, well, I should say clear, as lawyers could get it, lanes when it comes to non-device clinical decision support, you know, device clinical decision support, software as a medical device. We also have new guidance from the FDA, you know, around AI in all manner of contexts. With that said, it remains to be seen how this functionality emerges, and frankly, what, you know, new leadership at the FDA, existing career staff at the FDA want to stake as their, you know, claim or focus areas within these sorts of functions. Even, you know, outside the medical device, you know, kind of regulatory framework, there's also just making sure that, you know, these tools like do what they say they're going to do, and you've got FTC problems if you can't you know, check that off your compliance to-do list. So I'm curious though, you know, Brendan, Jennifer, like what are you guys thinking about AI scribes? Is it going to collapse? Is it going to explode?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
I was gonna say, I mean, I hope I think it's the integration part. How does it integrate with the EHRs? That's what I would double click into, because what today without them, I feel like Brendan might have this experience too, is when I integrate to different EHR systems or to the different clients of those EHR systems, so the provider sites, a lot of time we're seeing a difference in the data that comes back through our APIs, right? So like family history for me has always been, it's never there, you never get it. Social histories could be updated too, but like the things that we're looking for sometimes aren't there because they weren't captured and that, or they're not making it into the chart, and then there's no, it's not making it into whatever format, whether it's a FHIR format or CCDA. So like if we start seeing Scribe technology that is tightly coupled with the EHR, and then it's slotting into the right place, and then it's being moved around and then used for other applications, that's a game changer. I mean, for me, just even the notes section, notes are um, notes are hard and they're complicated because of whoever the author is, right? And I think to what you were saying, down to different specialties, it's going to need, um, there's going to need to be more nuance in that technology. But if it is successful, I think it is a game changer in the type of quality and the content that's being then shared downstream to other stakeholders, whether it's the patient, provider, or payer, whoever it is. It's going to be great for drug development.
We're
I'm just going to jump in.
Development in a second here. Brendan?
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and say, agree with those threads you're pulling at. So if EHR integration is the most important thing, and EHRs, there are a variety of them, hundreds, right? Then inherently the market remains fragmented because there's strategic leverage to going very deep. Integration is not a binary, it is an increasing scale. And the goal of AI scribes, when you view it as, I need to just do what a scribe used to do and listen and type in a note, wow, we're done, it'll commoditize. That is not the reality of what an AI assistant that passively listens offers. What it offers is to get rid of every click by simply listening to a conversation. And the level of integration well exceeds anything that's been done for any applications with EHRs today. And so the work is infinite, and we'll take deep EHR relationships, EHRs to make new APIs, screen scraping for EHRs that lack those capabilities, that have either appetite nor technical prowess to do that. And so the actual, I think Aaron and everyone else that has that take is tracing something, thinking just about like the Epic market. But if you think about the all providers market, the scribe that's building for Oasis for home health has a moat and a differentiator that like is like, a bridge is not going to go after. So I think we see a fragmented market. I think we see a level of complexity to that market that is commensurate and pretty closely tied to the EHR market, because scribes, in comparison to AI agents, are tightly coupled to EHRs and will be for the foreseeable future. And so I think there's lots of opportunity. I think there's lots of competition, and there'll be tons of companies that are vaporware or will fail, but that's just part of a hot, useful market. Because I do think very strongly that AI scribes are the easiest quick AI win of any modality. An active interface like ChatGPT is very invasive. All of the agent-based workflows that may replace either low-level physicians or low-level users of the EHR or specific functions of the EHR have lots of regulation and red tape and fear, uncertainty, and doubt associated with it. So it's very easy to be like full send on making our providers as productive as possible via Scribe. And so all the money, all the attention is flooding into that particular realm, which will benefit individual provider users immensely over the next year, 2 years, 5 years.
So this is a long game, is what I'm hearing. But I also am hearing that the way that these vendors will sort of convert themselves from a commoditized ambient only type thing is to start differentiating. Perhaps they're deeper in their integration with the EHR, much more on the workflow, much more on the order entry, perhaps even populating the family history appropriately, as opposed to just a blob of text somewhere in a note. Also hearing that a lot of this is going to come down to really thinking through knowing that an internal medicine doc like me might have a different need for an ambient scribe than an orthopedic surgeon who spends most of his or her time in the operating room, or a pediatrician who might need to deal with a mother and a baby that are in the room at the same time. And then the final one I thought was very interesting, was Alya's comment about clinical decision support within the ambient world. And then Jennifer, your comment around drug development. And I think what I'm hearing from you guys is that perhaps there's a continuum, that this is a specific activity that's going to springboard into other work that's going to make us all better as clinicians, and perhaps even start to reduce some of the variability that's driving poor outcomes. And maybe that can be funded by life sciences who have deep pockets. Is that what I'm hearing? Maybe.
Well, go ahead, Jennifer.
I think that there's just only a certain amount of organizations that can fund projects, right? So if you think about just AI aside, AI scribes aside, if you're starting a startup and you're looking for who your customer is, you're really looking at insurance, health insurance payers, or you're looking at life science. Providers do not have budgets for this. And then for me, I'm pro new drug development, new drugs to the market faster, quicker, better. It helps everybody. I think that where we are with being able to use EHR data in drug development and clinical trials, that is still an evolving market. The better the data is, the more access it to is, with the right privacy and terms and conditions and everything in place, data governance. But I think, yeah, if we can decrease the cost to get drugs to market, and then we're able to offer them at the right price, and we're not trying to, health plans can offer them to their members, I mean, that's great. And I think that this plays a long role in it. This is a long journey. People will talk about this after me. I'm not the first person to say this. I'm just saying it here on our podcast.
Sure, sure. But I think what I'm hearing you say, though, is that this is an important gap that exists, and there could be some subsidized models where those who need innovation in the office, it can be paid for by those who need the product, the data product, if you will, or the patient identification, or the raw materials, the data exhaust that comes out of the interactions, and therefore the ecosystem could help sort of fund this process to move along. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I don't know, Brendan, how you feel about this, but I just feel like the data that providers, they started with handwritten notes, with SOAP notes, right? This is what you're taught, how you're documenting. And then we evolve into everything's documented electronically. And I just think, like, when you're sorting through different EHRs, where the thing that you're looking for is in different places. To me, the thing that I always gravitate towards is the note section. I think there's a lot of value in that data. And if scribes are being used to generate the quality of that data, it keeps improving. The other thing you're looking for is obviously meds and labs, but that's more standardized. That free text area, to me, is the most interesting place within the EHR. And it's also the kind of dirtiest, poorest quality data because it is free text.
Yeah, I think, I know you were kind of directing that at Brendan, but I'll just say that I think as a clinician, I will tell you, the quality of my notes were not for a future clinical trial or a clinical study that might have been done. And no matter how many people were in the room listening to the conversation, they probably wouldn't get the kind of data that they needed to perform some of that. But you did bring up something interesting, which is that there could be perhaps a bifurcating role for the patient visit. Maybe the patient is actually collecting some data on his or her own before the visit, and then there's some questions that the doc is nudged to ask because of what might be going on. But I would, before I know, Alya, you had a point to make. Before we go there, I know, Brendan, do you want to respond to Jennifer's question?
I'm gonna redirect it to Alya. So like the business model that AI Scribe, AI anything agnostic, as a business associate, selling to the last remaining individual practitioners, and you are coming to me or to Jennifer or to Alya, and you're saying, you know what, my go-to-market is I'm going to sell to pharma, and I'm going to build some cool product in order to do so. I just the selling of the exhaust and then backing your way into like something useful and like trying to give away for free. I just don't like it. I'm sorry. Like there's got to be a better way. And like,
I'm not saying give anything away for free.
all that to say is like when I'm a business associate, I make a Scribe product and I say I know I'm going to go monetize it by selling it to pharma, um, and this like kind of hide that in a business associate agreement that a small solo practitioner or somebody doesn't know how to interpret or read. Not my favorite business model, and one that I hope doesn't see take off in
Well,
with these scribes or with anything else.
I think the
I,
only other way we'd see this evolve then would be how would where would providers find this in their budget to adopt this technology? Or do you say this is more of like a free provided service that's bundled within their EHR? Or if they don't have an EHR, we know there's tons that don't have CERT technology.
I think that this is from as the husband of a clinician, a social worker, uh, this is something that is very interesting even to organizations that have very little funding or exist on the margins just because of the sheer utility in terms of pajama time and happiness and things like that. Um, I'm a realist, and I realize that there will be business as long as the law allows for business models. These business models will exist. I'm just saying personally, like the flat iron, let me sell the exhaust. Okay, let me go build a cool product in order to do so is one that I typically shy away from because I'm naive.
Well,
well,
yeah. Well, I would say, Brendan, I think that we as a industry need to start differentiating between like what feels like commercialization of data to us and sounds and just like feels icky and dirty from being able to have the know-how and the resources to extract meaningful trends and insights from data and share that in a practical, actionable way with whoever those insights are meant to benefit. And that's where I see, like, I think Jenny, your point around like around drug development and trials and just the possibility that notes are just better and more fulsome and more detailed and captured in a way that it's easier than ever before to like aggregate and analyze and extract those trends. I think I love that as a business model. So maybe Brendan, this is where like one of the rare areas where we disagree, but I want really smart people who have a better bend to math and science than I have to be looking at this narrative mess of healthcare data and coming up with interesting ways to extract trends and insights. And the if the economic model for that means like they sell a product in one sense, right, Jenny, to one set of stakeholders, and then they generate these insights and then license or make available or partner with other organizations to make use of that. Like I think that happens today, including with some of the biggest companies in our industry. But I also think that that is how we move healthcare forward. Like we have to start learning from these terabytes upon terabytes of records that we have created and continue to proliferate across data centers, worldwide. And I'm really interested in more companies coming to the data lakes, coming to care delivery sites with the mind towards like I've got a specific question I want to answer, a problem I want to solve, and I think the answer is in this haystack somewhere.
I think what we ought to do, because I think this is a perfect topic for another podcast, frankly, because I think there are definitely some strong opinions. Throughout my career, I've leaned on the side that we don't do enough with the data we collect today in order to find patterns of things that might be going wrong. I was involved with, at the Cleveland Clinic, I was involved with the whole analysis of our data to see who was taking Vioxx, which had some unintended consequences. So I think there's definitely some value of mining the data. The question I think comes in is the transparency. What is the data going to be used for? How's it going to be used? Was it known before the data was being collected that this could be used for this purpose? And are we looking at all the other unintended consequences that it might happen? I think this is a topic that has a lot of passion on both sides. I think it's happening quite a bit today. But as we get more and more AI injected into the system and people do less and less reading of the fine print, we're going to need to be very, very careful. But I do want to go to a related topic. And it goes back to some of the comments that you all three of you made around the really understanding the quality of the data, the responsibility of these models, even the transparency aspects of them. And there is an increasing trend right now to sort of really think through, can we sort of publish out to the users and buyers of different AI technologies these model cards that can help create some transparency into the different attributes that one might need in order to make an appropriate decision. It's kind of like the sticker that's outside the car when you're about to buy a new car. It has a line item for every bit of detail, and there are some rules around what needs to be on that decal on the car when you're buying a car. It has an MSRP. It has every single option. There's some comfort in people seeing that when they go buy a car. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing on the machine learning and AI model side of the house, and there are different groups that are promoting these types of things. Um, this model card business could be a way for us to perhaps fight against those snake oil salesmen who might be trying to put out an AI model that it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and perhaps get to a point where we can start to measure apples and oranges, and then compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So maybe go around, and maybe Jennifer, you start off. What are your thoughts on these model cards and having vendors be required to, or having them be recommended to build these model cards out so that there's transparency into their algorithms? Any thoughts?
Well, I think I have a limited background in this, so I'm going to kind of just speak from my experience to date, and hopefully it will evolve. I work at a company called Milliman now, which is a global actuarial consulting firm. And, almost every insurance company uses Milliman for their actuarial expertise. And, I have been following what's been happening across different states. There needs to be transparency into how the models work, and I think there's an issue. There's how much do you show of how your model works versus protecting IP. I think that's what it's coming down to, if I'm understanding most of the disputes at hand. But I do think that there needs to be as much transparency around that while still protecting IP, because I think that is the fair thing to do. I think it's an evolving space. I think Alya might know more about it. Um, but generally, I do think you need to do side-to-side compares, right? You don't want to just buy the first thing off the shelf. You want to test different things against the same questions across, and I think you want to compare the results. I love A/B testing. That's kind of how I see of all this. Buyer beware and do your own homework.
Yeah,
Brandon,
I'm
Alya?
happy to jump in here. I mean, this is again, we've got some examples of what an effective model card looks like. My good friend Mark Sendak at the Duke Institute for Health Innovation just issued a version 2 of his famous model facts label from back in March of 2020. Nothing important about those that month. Where
Is it the sepsis model? The
yeah,
sepsis?
it's a sepsis model, but he's updated it to include new data elements that map to technical terms, source attributes, and the ASTP's decision support interventions framework. I loved the update because, well, first of all, I think it is much more effective for people to have a quick reference document, model card, facts label, whatever, nutritional facts label, whatever you want to call it, about when you should use this thing and when you shouldn't. Because asking clinicians to click a little info button next to a model output in workflow to read a 25-page white paper about the input sources and weighting and et cetera, disclaimers, like that just isn't effective. So I am all for model cards. I do think, however, that just like AI governance questionnaires that I continue to have to manage now that I'm, back in in-house vendor seat. Like, they can't be brittle. They need to be dynamic. They need to be tailored to so that you're not asking questions that do not make sense for a highly administrative model that is literally just applying OCR to take text and make it scannable and searchable. And unfortunately, I think, are still in this hypersensitive era around these tools where everyone is taking a conservative approach when asking for information about models. And to Jenny's point, it results in some questions being asked that would implicate proprietary information. And I just think there's a better place we can land where we're sharing the basics about, what data does this need to operate successfully? In what context should it be used? Please do not use it in the following context. That information, I think, is something that people should be willing to share, especially if they're trying to sell their product. And it's a warning sign for me if someone can't answer those questions or isn't willing to share that in a kind of a concise statement. But I don't know, Brendan, what you're seeing out there.
This is one where we converge again and we can high five as we tag team this. Like HDI1 DSI is a nice vehicle, a nice like related thing to the model cards that is out there, is real. The model cards are pretty awesome. I think there's a big difference between let me slap this one on the website versus let me hand this to you after we have an NDA as a health system. And so yeah, we have to tease those out, but transparency engenders trust. And so that applies here in the sense that if I'm going to go trust this model, do something like that, a model card is a good standard vehicle to communicate that in a way that doesn't require tons of cognitive load for which large institutions will have, but again, small providers will not. And so just thinking in that way, in that model of it's not all about a bridge and DAX at the top of the stack here. It's about small providers wanting to adopt tools just as much.
I think you said something really important, Brandon, that I want to sort of double click on. The whole point of bringing AI into the point of care is to reduce the physical and cognitive load on the clinicians. And in some of the model cards I've seen, not all of them, and certainly not the one from Duke, but many of them go into so much detail that clinicians, you might end up, not you personally, but one might end up making them a little bit nervous about whether they've got the digital AI literacy in order to even use AI in their practice. So I think a pragmatic approach, maybe even sort of tying in the comments made earlier about clinical decision support, having a CDS system to help inform when an AI algorithm is appropriate and when it's not, that can be validated. And of course, then the question is, do you need a model card for that CDS system? And then you got this chain effect, if you will. So I think there does need to be some work done on simplifying and making the model card at the point of care a little bit more pragmatic, because otherwise the clinicians who are already feeling like they're missing things are going to feel like they're missing things, and they won't know how to best utilize this at the right time for the right patients. But I think model cards are here to stay. I think they will be codified. They will be tied into other health IT solutions so that they can be implemented easily at the point of care in a way that doesn't require them pushing a button and bringing up a 30-page white paper. And that will happen. That's just a matter of time. But I do want to, does anyone have any other comments on model cards before I shift focus?
How widely adopted are they right now?
There are some groups, some coalitions that are meeting to sort of make them a little bit more common, but they're I would say they're increasingly being rolled out, but by no means are they considered a standard of care right now, from what I could tell.
I think I saw an update from the wonderful Jeff Smith at HHS ONC ASDP that there are, I think, at least 200 certified health IT products that have, essentially attested to compliance with the decision support intervention framework, which again, they might not have organized their information into a beautifully formatted nutritional facts label, but that's potentially at least 200 products that have information about like what their model does, what its input sources are, how it should be used, and why it's reliable, along with like information about how the developers are managing risks on those. So as of December 31st of last year, like we are in a new information era when it comes to health AI governance, and I guess more to come from here.
Yeah,
Brett,
but
you were
Alya,
referencing the VCI for the vaccine card.
Say that again.
repeat that.
You were referencing the VCI for the vaccine initiative. Which acronym did you say earlier for the
DSI, decision support.
ESI? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
So,
Yeah, so
by
just to jump in there, this is the last like of the HTI-1 criteria. It just came into effect. And so the grain of salt we should take on like it actually working for all these certified health IT products is a boulder of salt, because as we've seen with patient access APIs, Jenny looking at you, EHI export, looking at Josh Mandel somewhere, like you can be compliant and the criteria be satisfied for enough for Drummond, but have it, in the field not available or not work. And so I think I'd be super hesitant to imagine. I'm just guessing like the percentage.
You're not reading DSI source attribute summaries every night before you go to sleep, Brendan?
That's my new lullaby for my daughter. Yeah, that's right.
Come on.
And correct if I'm wrong, but this only applies to certified EHR technology, anything that's put in the EHR,
Right.
all the stuff that consumers may be using directly.
Yeah, and Anil, I think it's important to remember this is something that Brendan and I probably know too. A lot of EHR vendors have multiple products, so not all product lines are certified. And I think certification is due for a makeover, but you're going to have products that are certified and non-certified. So this is interesting. This is a good topic.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how the new administration takes on the certification process. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But I do think that we've talked about EHRs quite a bit, and we know that I think was it Oracle Cerner announced that they have a completely rebuilt AI first EHR. Am I describing that correctly? And there's even a program where people can get onto the EHR as an early adopter. When you think about the 200 DSI apps that are out there, the 100 apps that Epic announced that they're UGM, that are AI based, if you will. What's going to happen with the EHR wars? I mean, should we just assume it's going to be the 4-letter EHR and we're done? We don't have to discuss this, or what's going to happen with the EHR wars?
Brendan has to go first here.
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Well, antitrust and information blocking. I think there's like a whole other segment we could dedicate to just this discussion. But on the subject of
antitrust in the next 4 years?
Well, we're already in the thick of antitrust, given the antitrust by particle against Epic. But those forces, could knock or impede the growth of certain players, right? I think information blocking ultimately will prove a little bit more impactful than antitrust. But that's just me being candid. I think from the AI perspective, we need to realize we are in the assistant era, and there's still the agent era ahead of us that we have no idea what that looks like and what the pressures that puts on. So I think as long as we're in the assistant era of scribes and things that co-pilots that sit alongside, the EHRs are entrenched. They're they're choosing their partners and things like that. The agent era changes who the user is, and accrues much more value to the business if it actually works, right? Right now, the assistant era, the scribes, the value accrues largely to the user. They are happier, they are faster. That might trickle up to the enterprise, but the enterprise that's looking for true ROI and value is going to look much more and anticipate much more that agent era, where there are agents doing things entirely replacing roles or instead of augmenting roles. That accrues value directly to the enterprise. So that also is not something an agent does not need to use an EHR necessarily. And so that is the seismic next shift that the first in 25 years that we'll see that might displace EHRs largely is, I think, what a lot of people are predicting.
I think we should do a whole, I would like to double click into that in another episode. I find that actually very interesting. I've been digging into some of the keynotes and videos from CES, and I thought they were very good, kind of at doing AI for dummies primers on the agent. So I think that'd be interesting. I think the EHRs, well, there's a couple things. First of all, they're usually on 10-year contracts, right? So we saw a lot of contracts ending and people moving around from one vendor to another. There's nothing to say that people can't roll back to another EHR. They could keep flip-flopping for the next 30, 50 years unless there's some sort of new disruptive technology. So that's number one. Number two is I think you have to look at the market, right? So I think that there's the hospital market and then there's everything else. I think it's the everything else that's the most interesting for EHRs. We've kind of touched on this a little bit throughout our conversation, but like once you start getting down past the top 10 vendors, there are so many different specialty EHRs. There's still people on non-certified technology. Brendan writes about this a lot, new EHR platforms, headless EHR platforms. I think there's still a lot of opportunity around that to put software into practices. And as what practices change and they evolve, where people receive care, how they're receiving care. So I think that just the EHR that we've known, that came out of high tech, maybe we're talking about the next version of that, something that's past high tech, past Cures Act, whatever that version is, and it might be closely tied to AI if it's going to decrease a provider's, a burden workflow, everything that they're doing that's taking them actually away from care.
So an agentic-driven post-EHR world.
Yeah. Where there's lots of really good
Heard it
data.
here first, folks. Yeah.
Lots of really good quality data is coming out.
Just the highest integrity and quality data
Yeah.
for a holistic longitudinal view of every patient.
Yeah.
And all patients like them.
And all your care gets paid for.
Yes.
We solved it. Call President Trump. We solved it.
Got it. Well, here's just a hot take. Or maybe not a hot take. I just think that a ground up approach to integrate AI into an electronic health record could facilitate the agent-based kind of reality that Brendan was outlining. Again, so not to say like I don't have any people here know who I used to work for. I don't have a dog in this race, but I just do think that there's this interesting question about like what's the actual vision here? Is it assistant? Is it workflow streamlining? Is it more AI? AI bots fighting with one another over prior authorizations, or is it something bigger and better than that? But whatever the case is, the economics have to work because Jenny, while yes, you can get out of your EHR contract maybe after a decade, it is so expensive to actually execute on that, and just the infrastructure costs, the data migration costs, the training costs, all the frustration that you create with end users, clinicians, and patients. It's not a decision to be taken lightly. So I think it's going to have to be whatever comes next. It's going to have to be pretty spectacular to uproot some of the really deep and highly productive, frankly, relationships that healthcare organizations have established with, legacy electronic medical record vendors.
Yeah. So I know we are running out of time, but I do want to ask you one final question. And if you can, all three of you guys can give us a very brief, your wish list. ViVE and HIMSS is coming up. What would you love to see at ViVE and HIMSS in terms of AI and healthcare? Like, I want to see vendors that are doing A, B, and C.
Digital twins for clinical trials so that folks with terminal and serious illnesses do not have to be in the placebo group. That's what I want to see.
Jennifer?
I want to see some really killer OCR, AI, whatever you can get. Take paper, unstructured documents, and make it structured. I have not seen somebody who's killing that yet. I would really like to see that because there's a lot of data that doesn't live in the EHR, and we need to figure out how to move it around. And interoperability is not going to solve that. So let's see who's going to nail that category.
Brendan?
Yeah, I don't know if this type of company, it's that leapfrog of AI that we were just sort of talking about. I don't think it's like an EHR company doing AI, like Oracle doing their new AI EHR. I think it's new provider organizations that are 10x better than everything we have today, that is actually what's going to like spur the change and the movement away from EHRs, so that it's less people moving from their current EHR over. It's new provider organizations that are 10 times more effective and efficient because they've been built with the assumption of everything is AI. It's like something along those lines. I don't think it'll be this HIMSS or ViVE. I think it'll be sometime in the future just because of the regulatory barriers. But that is the sea change. That's the thing that I think disrupts the EHR and thus ties to our last topic.
Well, I would love to see everything the three of you mentioned at the ViVE and HIMSS. I would also love to see a high quality note produced by Ambient that doesn't require any editing. We'll see what that happens. But well, thank you very much for joining me on this conversation. I look forward to having more. Thank you so much.